Today when we think of Indian cities, we think of density, traffic, and a skyline where some building is constantly under construction. Our cities feel endless, ever expanding, almost chaotic. But it wasn't always like this. India has had a rich history of urban experiments. So today on Blessedarch, let's actually travel back in time to explore cities that laid the foundation of urban India. So on this channel, let's explore cities that were built before 1947. Our first city is Jaipur. Founded in 1727 by Maharaja Sawai Jai Singh, Jaipur was built on a precise geometric grid where most roads met each other at right angles. Now there are actually two theories about how Jaipur's urban plan was conceived. The first theory suggests that the city was designed around a single strong axis, running all the way from Chand Pole or Moon Gate to Suraj Pole or the Sun Gate. Now perpendicular streets were made to intersect this axis at 90 degrees, creating a series of rational blocks and marketplaces within the city. So that's the first theory, but the second theory is the most widely accepted one. This theory states that Jaipur was designed according to the Vastu Purusha Mandala derived from Vastu Shastra and Shilpa Shastra. According to this concept, the city was divided into 9 square blocks representing the Navgraha or the 9 divisions of the Hindu cosmos. However, because the Aravalli Hills were on one side, one block had to be slightly shifted, giving Jaipur its final form that we still recognize today. At the heart of this layout stood the city palace. This is the home to the royal family, and within the same compound is the famous Govind Dev Ji temple, the spiritual center of the city. Around this block, every other block was a mixed-use space with residential quarters, artisan workshops, marketplaces, and temples, all placed with remarkable logic. There's a clear hierarchy of streets, from central squares like Badi Chaupad or Choti Chaupad to actual bazaars like Johari Bazaar, down to narrow residential lanes that open up into intimate courtyards. Each street was also lined with uniform facades, giving the city its cohesive architectural identity. By the way, the famous pink city look came in much later in the 19th century. This is when the entire city was painted terracotta pink to welcome the Prince of Wales. But colors aside, the urban design logic that made Jaipur such a distinct city was there right from the start. So when you look at Jaipur today, even with all the noise and the chaos, the underlying logic and the geometry is still there. By the way, full disclaimer, I am from Jaipur, so I might just sound a little biased towards this city. But anyway, that was the beautiful city of Jaipur. Now, let's move on to our next one. Our next city takes us from Jaipur's rational plan to Mughals' vision of urban power. This is Shahjahanabad, or what we today call as Old Delhi. Now if you visit it today, Old Delhi seems chaotic with narrow lanes, traffic everywhere, incredible density. But it didn't start that way. In the 17th century, the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan decided to move his capital from Agra to Delhi, and that is when this old city was created. Built along the banks of the river Yamuna, the city's plan revolved around the Red Fort or the Lal Killa. From this fort emerged a wide ceremonial avenue, Chandni Chowk, the city's main spine. So today if you go to Chandni Chowk, it looks something like this. But back then, Chandni Chowk was very different. It was this tree-lined avenue with shops and havelis. It even had a canal running through its center. So when you look at the plan of Old Delhi, you can identify these few elements. From here, everything else was created. So we have the Red Fort, the Fatehpuri Masjid, the Chandni Chowk, and the Jama Masjid. Around these, everything else was created. And something special was that Jama Masjid at that time was raised on a plinth and was made such that it would be visible from anywhere in the city. So the city did not have a rigid grid like Jaipur, and it was a lot more informal. But it was a structured informality. Also, the city was divided into 3 zones, and right here in the north zone was the space for royal residences. So the logical next question might be, if Old Delhi was so well planned, what happened to it? Why does it look so chaotic today? Well, to answer that question, we first need to go back to when the British took over the city. Once they took over, inside the Red Fort, they demolished Mughal palaces and built military barracks. They also constructed the railway line north of the city, effectively cutting the old town into 2. They even covered up the canal that once defined Chandni Chowk. So with time, with their interventions, Shahjahanabad lost its old charm. But the real chaos came in after independence. Waves of refugees settled in this city seeking both work and shelter. Buildings got subdivided, courtyards got filled in, green spaces that were once in the city vanished overnight. Slowly, the planned city of the Mughals transformed into the dense, complex maze we call Old Delhi today. Now, there have been efforts made recently to mitigate a lot of the problems of Old Delhi, especially around the Chandni Chowk area. But this part of the city still remains one of the most densely populated and one of the most congested areas of Delhi. But when you actually walk through the city, you will see that the old charm still survives. The mixed-use streets, the community courtyards, these elements or traces of these elements still linger on, and they show you how people adapt to these elements to live their life and experience the space around them. There are actually heritage walks that happen in this city, in the old city area. So I encourage you to walk through them and you will understand the architectural character that I'm talking about. And while you're visiting Old Delhi, you can actually also visit the next city on our list because you won't have to go very far. Because right next to Shahjahanabad or Old Delhi lies its exact opposite. New Delhi or Lachen's Delhi. Now you might think, why am I talking about Old Delhi and New Delhi? Aren't they both just part of Delhi today? And yes, Delhi today is a huge city. But back when these were created, these were also separate cities with their own identity. After the British moved their capital from Calcutta to Delhi in 1911, they saw this as an opportunity to create a city that would showcase the grandeur and permanence of the British Raj. The job to design this new city went to Sir Edwin Lutyens. The vision here was clear. Delhi would no longer be an organically growing city like Shahjahanabad. It would be a city of order and symmetry. At the center of the entire scheme stood the Viceroy's house. From here, a central axis was made right till the India Gate. This was the Kingsway or the Rajpath. This axis was transversed in the middle by Janpath, which connected to the Connaught Place. Using these axes and focal points, everything else was ordered. Now, unlike the dense bazaars of Old Delhi, Lutyens' Delhi was vast and open. A city of broad avenues, sprawling bungalows and monumental vistas. This urban plan actually led to one of the greenest spaces of Delhi today. And all of this because Edwin Lutyens actually mandated that at least 1/3 of the whole area will remain green space. The architecture here was also unique because it combined European classicism with Indian motifs. Jalis, chhatris and domes were reinterpreted to give British buildings an Indian character. Now, even though this urban design created incredible spaces, it also made starkly clear the class divide that the British were trying to propagate. The distances in this plan were actually a statement. The new rulers of this land were physically distant from those who they ruled. And it's very interesting that all of this just flipped the day India got its independence, because the same streets that represented British and colonial power were now the face of a new and independent India. The Viceroy's house became the Rashtrapati Bhavan, and the central vista, once the path of imperial parades, became the route for Republic Day celebrations. Now, Delhi is made up of different parts, but especially understanding these two, the old city and the new city, you understand at least a part of Delhi's evolution. And you also understand, because these both are in so close proximity to each other, you understand that the intention behind the design makes such a big difference on the final design itself. Anyway, since we're talking about colonial cities, let's move on to our next city. We're now traveling to another colonial experiment, but this time in the south of India. We are going to Chennai, or as it was called then, Madras. So in the 17th century, the British East India Company acquired this small piece of land in an area called Madrasapatnam. Here they actually built a fort, Fort St. George. Now back then it was a military fort, but it also became the nucleus of the new city that was to come. The fort was the origin point. Inside were warehouses, offices, a church and residences for company officials. Around the fort, some European settlements began to grow. And here is where the divide created by British became evidently clear. The buildings in here, which only the Europeans could live in, were all painted white. As a result, over time, this area came to be known as the White Town. Around this area, local merchants, artisans and laborers began settling down. This area then came to be known as the Black Town. So some might say it is just because of the color of the houses, but in this city, there was a literal segregation between people who were whites and non-white. So it's almost like spatial segregation became the tool for governance. Now even in the Black Town, British did lay down some order for streets and housing, laying them on a grid. Over time, of course, the city of Madras grew and the villages around it became a part of this city. The British also specifically developed a lot of infrastructure for this city because Madras became the central point or the hub for all of British activity in southern India. Buildings like the High Court, Ripon Building and Madras University used domes, arches and verandas not just for aesthetics, but were a way to adapt European architecture into the Indian climate and context. Today, the city of Chennai has sprawled far beyond the small coastal fort, and it's one of the biggest cities of India. But Fort St. George still stands, the starting point of an empire and a blueprint of how the colonial powers shaped the Indian subcontinent. Looking at these cities, you kind of understand the power play and how that actually trickled down into design. It's a very interesting study. But for our next city, we actually will travel much further back in time and see a city made with much different intentions. Our next city predates all others on this list by more than 2000 years. This is Madurai. Now the story goes that the city was created where the divine nectar or Madhuram was dropped on earth, and that is where the name of the city Madurai actually comes from. But beyond the story, let's actually take a look at the urban design of the city. At the heart of Madurai stands the Meenakshi Amman temple, dedicated to goddess Meenakshi, a form of Parvati, and her consort Sundareshwar, which is a form of Shiva. This temple is truly a magnificent piece of design. It is specifically known for its towers or gopurams, covered with sculptures painted in bright hues. Now when you see the plan of this city, you realize everything here radiates from this temple. The city was designed on a concentric pattern with a series of rectangular streets surrounding the temple. Each of the rings here represented a different social and functional layer. So priests and temple staff stayed closest to the temple, merchants and artisans in the middle rings, and so on. So the spatial logic of this city represented the social and spiritual fabric of that time. Also, the temple's gopurams and their design was quite special because the whole city was designed such that from any point the temple's towering gopurams remained visible. So these were a constant visual anchor throughout the city. Over time, of course, the city grew much beyond these streets and expanded in many different ways. But the original plan, the temple at the center and concentric rings around it, remains intact even today. And honestly, this wasn't the only city designed like this. There are many temple towns that were designed in the exact same way, where the temples were the center of the city, or at least one of the prominent elements. Maybe I should do a whole series of temple towns in India. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. But specifically Madurai, I actually wanted to include in this particular list to actually show that even before, let's say 2000 years ago, we still had some urban order. We still had spatial logic that we applied to our cities. So when you're looking at the history of India and the history of urban design in India, it's interesting to look at how we evolved from that logic to the logic that we apply today. It is a change in priorities, it is a change in society, it is a change in urban order, and it's just a very interesting study. Okay, now we have come to the final city on our list. This is the first industrial city of India, Jamshedpur. In the early 1990s, industrialist Jamshedji Tata dreamt of building not just a steel plant, but an entire city. He wanted to create a city where industry and community could grow together. For this, he actually sent his engineers around the world to study urban design of industrial cities. And what emerged from that was the first industrial city of India. Founded in 1990, this city was very different from any that we have discussed on this list, because this was a city designed for the new industrial age, specially made for the workers. Now, Jamshedji Tata had written in his vision letter, "Be sure to lay wide streets planted with shady trees, reserve large areas for parks, see that there is plenty of space for lawns and gardens." So we can see that right from the start there was a lot of stress given to the quality of life in this city. And this philosophy and care for its residents actually shaped the entire plan. The layout created by Julian Kennedy and later Otto Koenigsberger is built around functional zoning. So here is the Tata Steel plant, and the areas around it are populated with residential areas, markets and civic centers. The whole design here was created thinking of the modern working family. This plan included segregated land use but also integrated amenities, housing, schools, hospitals, playgrounds and clubs, all located within close proximity. And yes, this is an industrial city but was also designed to be a green city with a lot of space allotted to green areas. Every last bit, even the utilities and infrastructure, power lines, sewage treatment, water supply, everything here was planned from the start to make sure that the residents here have a good and comfortable life. Over time, of course, the city has expanded and become a full-fledged urban center. And it continues not just to function but also thrive even today. And that was the last city on our list. Now you might have noticed I actually brought in very different cities from different eras, different mindsets with which the cities were made. And there is a reason I chose these particular cities. I actually want to show you the urban design principles that have been employed in India over such a long time and how each one of them is very different because the intention behind creating that layout was very, very different. And yes, these are not the only cities that were built before 1947 or can be categorized as planned cities. There are so many more. I just chose these particular examples because these could perfectly highlight what I wanted to show you. And that was it, you guys. Those were some of the cities that were designed in India before 1947. What did you think of these cities? What did you think of the design here? Let me know in the comments. How many of these cities have you visited? Also, which other city should have been on this list? I want to know that as well. As always, give it a thumbs up and do share, but don't subscribe. Don't subscribe unless you want so much great content on architecture and urban design. It will take over your feed. It will be so educational for you. You will explore India, you will explore the world. So unless you want to do that, please don't subscribe. But if you do, please do subscribe. That was it. I will see you guys next time. Also, if you have more video ideas that I should create, let me know in the comments. I'll get to them. So yeah, see you in the next video. Bye-bye.